My belief on standards is they're absolutely essential, and I think they provide three predominant purposes. And there's one thing that people think they provide that they actually don't, and I think that's the key. The three things they do provide are: one, let's talk about standards for a little bit. Let's talk about, maybe the pros and cons of standards, because I think they've served a good, and they're also an inhibitor in some way. So what have you seen there?
I would say from a long-term perspective, standards are essentials.
Yep.
Essential. You need it.
Yep.
I know we have many proprietary solutions. We have many applications running wireless power, many use cases, many environments in which wireless power is done, but using proprietary. Yes, we do not require standard solution because, example, I would say AGVs or AMRs. Yes, there's a wireless power solution, but it's not an industry standard.
Yep.
I understand you will not pick one AGV from one factory and put another one for interoperability, but I think for the wider acceptance of the market, standard is very important. Because how you manage powering those devices wirelessly, the heating management, I think standard plays a very big role because you really have end up with a product which is like wow, safe, secure, and more widely adopted. The cost comes down easily with standardized. But at the same time, I think standard has to be developed. But I think every industry body should also understand that they have to evolve very faster. They have to evolve with the time.
Yeah, I have so many thoughts on this, but my first one is, my belief on standards is they're absolutely essential, and I think they provide three predominant purposes. And there's one thing that people think they provide that they actually don't, and I think that's the key. The three things they do provide are: one, interoperability. If you're going to have an ecosystem where there's a phone or a headphone, and then there's also a vehicle, and they have to work together, somebody needs to be the arbiter of how the technology works together. So interoperability is a no-brainer on multi-sided markets where it's not one company creating the whole ecosystem. The second thing is cost curves. When you get people to use the same technology, now you can actually create opportunities for companies to actually win successfully in the commodities game because there's so much to sell that it's okay to have 5-10 point margins because they're able to do it because there's billions of units, and that's a successful business. And then the third one I think is IP. And IP is something that it's still being developed, I think, in terms of how the IP landscape is going to shape out in wireless power. But when you look at more mature standards, if you look at 4G or 5G, a lot of what they're doing is they're putting the interoperability together, they're putting the cost curves together, and then they're putting the IP together to give some certainty to the end adopters on who they have to license from, or can they just buy the license from the pool, and things like that. One thing I think standards are not good for, and I think you're implicitly saying it, but I just want to pin the tail on the donkey here. Right there, I want to say they're not good at innovating, because it's you have all these different stakeholders at the table, and committees aren't really good for making a lot of progress. They're good for making safety and certainty. So you get companies like Apple developing something that's innovative for their user, which is MagSafe. Or you get a lot of the Chinese OEMs right now who are doing 50-watt phone charging. Doesn't work with the standard, but they want faster charging, and so they're going to do it on their own.
So I think you're right. Industry standard needs to keep a pace, along with the requirements of the market. Not like, okay, we have a standard, here it goes, then we're saying, okay, we relax. For some applications, yes, I think you have to evolve more faster. Keep tap of the market. For some applications, you don't need to evolve that fast. So I think it has to be very well balanced at the moment. Plus, I think you have to look into from a wider ecosystem perspective. For example, a mobile phone, mobile ecosystem, where, okay, I'm fine to adopt a cheese standard, but what about other devices within the mobile ecosystem?
I doesn't work with wearables, doesn't work with hearables,
so those things are there. So a standard is there where you can backward integrate and say, I have a 15-watt standard example, or a 5-watt standard. I can put my phone on that, I can put my watch on that, I can put all those things. At the moment, I think they're very categorized power classes in which standards have been product. I think standards to come where we have a more interoperability across the power levels. I think that will play a bigger role there.
So
and just coming back to your previous point, when you see wireless charging, I think there are at least two parties involved: receiver market and the transmitter market. And I think that's where the standard plays a role, because we want both to communicate together, have a similar product. A very out of wireless power market, a different example is like battery swapping, EVs. I'm hearing that in many countries the battery swapping is coming up. It's a good use case, everything, but it's not a standardized solutions. Imagine a low-grade batteries put, example, in a Tesla or a Neo or anything like that. You had it, your entire car blast. it gets fires.
Yeah, and the alternative is that you have to have different charging or swapping stations that are branded. So Tesla would need to work on installing, tens of thousands of battery swapping stations to have. And it's like, that doesn't work either. We don't. Shell sells gasoline that works in every vehicle. BP doesn't. There's the two sides of the market. So that interoperability is super important. What's interesting to me about that is, and what we see at New Current is that in consumer-facing markets, interoperability is essential. You can't do it without it. Like we just talked about with EV charging. That's me, a consumer, driving my car into a station to get a battery swap. I need to know that the battery going into my car fits and it's not going to damage my car and it's going to work well.
That's right.
Covered by warranty. So you need standards there. We don't see a lot of need for standardization in non-consumer markets, particularly industrial, medical, and internal auto. And so I mean, like when the manufacturer controls both the transmit and receive side, it doesn't need to work. It doesn't matter if Chevy's internal auto system works with Mercedes, because they're just creating their own link and they're getting the benefit of contactless connections, contactless power, contactless data, without the need for that standards approval. And so, in that way, one of my theories is that those markets can move a lot quicker, because they don't need to wait for everyone else to put the stamp of approval on it, introduce version 2.8.BC of the spec. They can just do it. Do you see any difference in speed in the medical, industrial, or non-consumer portions of the auto market?
Yeah, I think there also I would argue that standards will play a role there. It's very important. Why I'm saying, because if there was not a standard, there are 5 example players in the medical market example who are creating wireless charging solution. So if you see, everybody's reinventing the wheel. It is such a waste of a resource, I would say that.
Sure, you don't get the commodity curve if everyone does their own thing.
Yeah, and it's not required. Why are we creating 5 different technologies individually when we can all 5 work together and say, let's have a standard, let's work faster and do it right. There are many advantages to that rather than saying that. Yes, I can understand company does not want to showcase their technology to other people, but how much? Wireless power is becoming more like a standard future. It is the way to go. We are cutting costs, we are cutting batteries. So there's I think within no time we have to just think about, how we can make a clear standard over there.
So I'll put in a self-promotional plug here on that note. Whereas it might be tough to get, Medtronic, Boston Scientific, and St. Jude Medical to all work together to say, let's create something to drive the cost curve down. What they can do is that if they worked with New Current, for example, we're going to leverage a lot of existing technology. We don't want to invent for invention's sake. We understand cost sensitivity. We want to, today more than ever, you have to design for supply, not just design for performance and design for manufacturing. So you need to know that those parts are available, those components are available, the materials are available. And so one of the things we've tried to create at New Current is we've tried to create such a critical mass of different designs we've done, and we've launched more products into mass production across different categories than anyone in the world on purpose. We're trying to be good at consumer, automotive, industrial, medical, so we can learn and we can leverage common designs to give them that leverage, even if the standard doesn't exist yet.
Well, again, like I said, wireless charging is not like embedding or plug-and-play solution. There are many things attached to that. There's a chip technology, there's a coil technology, the battery technology. You could be good in a wireless charging technology, another one could be good in coil technology, third, or you have a good system on chips. I think everybody has their own core competency.
The software element of it, how do you pull it all together?
And how you play around with that, how you get it, I think, I would say synergies will play a very big role. So this year, I'm expecting more of partnerships and collaborations more between the company, which I've never seen earlier. Everybody wanted to be their own stuff.
Kind of playing their own game. We're a coil company, we can drive the market ourselves. We're a chip company, we can drive the market ourselves. We're a systems company, we can drive the market ourselves. It makes more sense to kind of get strategic partnerships.
Just sit on the table and say, this is my core competency, this is core yours. Let's come together, work it, and make this happen.